Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan, and I'm one of our events associates here at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. Today, we will be having our second Legislative Affairs Quarterly Update of 2025. This webinar offers closed captioning. To turn on, just click that CC button at the bottom of your screen, and we will have a brief Q&A at the end of the presentation, so feel free to submit your questions anytime via the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Joining us today is Kim Kelly, along with our Legislative Affairs team. Kim has been the Director of Legislative Affairs for over 6 years and works to develop and advance our key legislative initiatives and to improve and create stronger animal protection laws. I'll pass it over to you, Kim.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our second webinar of the year. This is the spring webinar. We'll have two more providing additional updates on our legislative progress throughout the year. With that, we're going to go ahead and jump in because it has been such a busy season thus far, and we have quite a few updates to share for our work across the country. Before we get into the specifics, I just want to give a bit of a snapshot of where we are in the legislative process for the year. For those of you who are a little bit less familiar, every state has their own legislative cycle. They have different rules, different session dates, different calendars. And you can see from here that about half of the states are still in session. Most states start their legislative sessions sometime in the first quarter of the year, January through March. And most of them start wrapping them up in April or May, and then with the other half continuing on through the year. The sessions can vary by year, where some states have shorter sessions that may be just a matter of weeks, and other states have long sessions every year, including a handful of states that are in session year-round. Also, as you're probably aware, Congress is in session most of the year. They take a break in August, but otherwise, members of Congress are meeting year-round as well. So with that, take note of where your state is, and we'll be providing an updates on a number of them specifically. Just as a snapshot of our work to date thus far, we've worked in 39 jurisdictions this year. That includes 38 states as well as at the federal level. We've worked on 276 bills. That can be various levels of engagement, from leading or co-leading to working in coalition to simply providing a letter in support or submitting testimony. So you'll get to hear about some of the different various work that we've done and the levels of work that we've done on our bills. Thus far this year, we've had 18 victories to date. That includes 6 bills that have been signed into law and 12 dangerous bills that have been counter to animals' interests that we have successfully defeated. Here's the team that's working on the bills across the country. We have Kathy Schatzman, who's based in New Jersey. She's one of our strategic legislative affairs managers. Alicia Prygoski is another strategic legislative affairs manager based in Virginia. Steph Harris is a senior legislative affairs manager based in Vermont. Jennifer Haig is our senior legislative affairs manager based in Oregon. Allison Lutke is our legislative affairs manager based in Washington, D.C. Lindsay Verhelig is our legislative affairs manager in Oregon. And our newest staff member, who we're so glad is taking on jurisdictions for the first time this year, is Kat Kelly, and she's based in Washington. And I just want to point out that our email addresses are listed below. Please make note of them if you would like to contact any of us individually. And with that, we'll jump in with Allison providing the federal update.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Ludke, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager who handles ALDF's federal portfolio. We're about 6 months into the 119th Congress, and since our last legislative webinar, not a whole lot has changed on our priority bills. As Kim mentioned, unlike many state sessions, the U.S. Congress lasts 2 years, and we often see the most movement towards the end of the year or in conjunction with deadlines, such as those for funding bills. As most of you know, we're operating with a Republican administration and a Republican Congress, meaning Republicans control both the House and the Senate. For those who joined the last webinar, I mentioned in February that Republicans were focused on passing President Trump's tax and spending agenda via the reconciliation process. The appeal here is that bills advanced through this process cannot be filibustered, meaning they can be approved by a simple majority in the Senate, not the usual 60 votes. The House has passed their version of this bill, and now the Senate committees plan to release text this week and begin a marathon markup session in the coming weeks. There is disagreement between the chambers on several issues, which will likely throw a wrench in Congress's goal to pass this before August recess. but we'll see what happens. Additionally, Congress has yet to pass a new farm bill. Instead, they've continued to extend the 2018 Farm Bill. Republicans plan to include some Farm Bill provisions in this reconciliation bill, which has faced a lot of pushback from Democrats. It seems unlikely that we will see a standalone Farm Bill this Congress, but as I said above, you never know. Aside from the reconciliation process, Congress faces a packed summer agenda, which includes writing, marking up, and in theory, passing all 12 appropriations bills, also known as spending bills, before September, which will be a challenge with such small majorities. We continue to operate in a space with lots of unknowns, much of which depends on the outcome of some of these larger legislative vehicles I just mentioned. That said, we're pushing forward on finding avenues in which we can move animal protection priorities forward. With that, I wanted to provide a quick overview of what the next few months will look like for our federal work, and then we'll highlight some of our priority bills. First, we'll be working to increase the co-sponsor count on bills by meeting with offices. For those of you who aren't familiar, a co-sponsor is a member other than the primary sponsor who formally adds their name in support of a bill or resolution. We develop target lists of offices based on which committees members are on and their role on relevant committees. Support from committee members and sign off from committee leadership is crucial in moving any bill forward to the hearing stage and securing an eventual markup within the committee. Simultaneously, we will continue to recruit endorsements from stakeholders, particularly in relevant states and districts of folks on relevant committees, and activate grassroots calls to action, which is where you all come in. And now to the good stuff. So priority bills and issues. The Captive Primate Safety Act, which would prohibit the private possession of non-human primates and make the pet trade of these animals illegal, was reintroduced in May. Although some states ban the private ownership of primates, others impose only partial restrictions or have no restrictions whatsoever. This patchwork of laws enables the pet trade to thrive and endangers the welfare of these animals and poses risks to public safety. Although the total number of primates kept as pets is unknown, estimates suggest that there are tens of thousands, and we continue to see incidents of escaped primates across the country. Shifting gears to the Octopus Act, in the 118th Congress, Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Lisa Murkowski introduced the Octopus Act for the first time. This bill would ban commercial octopus farming in the US and prohibit imports of farmed octopus from other countries. In honor of World Oceans Day this week, it will be reintroduced later in the week. As you'll hear shortly, this issue has gained traction in state legislatures across the country. Although there are no facilities currently farming octopus in the US, the growing research on octopus sentience, coupled with compelling media coverage of this issue, and the ongoing attempt to open the first octopus aquaculture facility in Spain, has driven interest in preempting this industry before it starts, which is a rare opportunity that we're really hoping to take advantage of. Moving on to down pigs. The Pigs and Public Health Act, introduced for the first time last Congress by Rep. Veronica Escobar, aims to reduce the number of non-ambulatory, or also known as down pigs, pigs who cannot walk or stand unassisted in the food system. In 2007, the Food Safety and Inspection Service of the USDA implemented regulations protecting non-ambulatory adult cows and extended these protections to calves in 2016. Like downed cattle, downed pigs not only suffer tremendously, but pose enormous risks of zoonotic disease transmission, including swine flu and avian flu. This bill will likely be introduced in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for an action alert, and we're also pursuing regulatory avenues as well. And then last but certainly not least, one of our top priorities this Congress and in previous Congresses has been defending Proposition 12. Last Congress, with ALDF's help, a diverse coalition of groups pushed back against the EATS Act, which would have overturned California's Prop 12 and other state ballot initiatives that have established farm animal welfare standards for products sold within their state borders. Although the EATS Act language was seemingly dead last year, very similar language directed at regulating livestock products was included in the House Farm Bill last session. The language is equally dangerous and would create uncertainty in the agricultural market while harming small farmers, animals, consumers, and rural communities, and upending states' rights while overturning the results of democratic elections. A lot is at risk if this bill were to move forward. Unfortunately, the EATS Act has been reintroduced in the Senate under a new name, the Food Security and Farm Protection Act, and we anticipate it will be reintroduced in the House soon. Because we are working in a Republican-controlled Congress, the dynamics are more challenging on this issue, and efforts to overturn Prop 12 persist. That said, legislative progress, particularly on the Farm Bill, has been slow, which in theory bodes well for this issue. But we're monitoring any and all legislation that Congress is moving to ensure this language is not attached. And with that, I will pass it over to Alicia.
All right. Thank you so much, Allison. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate you spending some time with us and learning more about our work and going over how the past few months have been since our last quarterly webinar. With that, Florida specific on the last quarterly webinar, we were in the middle of Florida's legislative session. It was chaotic. We were still working to get bills passed through the legislature, really a fast moving legislature because it's only 2 months long. Now session has concluded, and so we're able to go back. We're able to do a full debrief for Florida, as well as plan for what comes next and what is going to come in 2026. So first off, I want to give a huge thank you to anyone on the webinar today who might have attended Humane Lobby Day in Florida this past March. It was a great day. It was an absolutely great day that we co-hosted with Humane World for Animals, and our advocates had so many good meetings with their legislators. We were also able to feature several legislators who were kind enough to join us. And actually, in this picture, you can see Rep. Cheney and Rep. Weinberger, two of our absolute animal champions in Florida, speaking at a press conference, encouraging support for all of the animal bills at play during session. So again, super appreciative of anyone who showed up at Humane Lobby Day in Florida. So overall, with the legislative session in Florida, it was a challenging year. We can't shy away from that. It just was. It kind of fluctuates. Sometimes you have really good years in certain states. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging depending on the political climate or depending on what else is going on outside of the animal sphere. So we started out session with more than a dozen animal protection bills introduced. Only a few of them made it past committee, let alone passed into law. I would like to highlight one that did pass into law, though, and that is Trooper's Law. This was a huge victory. It was named after the dog who was tied up and left by the side of the highway during Hurricane Milton. This made national news, so I imagine folks are somewhat familiar with this. But anyway, the bill and now the law prohibits abandoning dogs during natural disasters. So what happened to Trooper won't happen again because that was an absolute travesty, and it was just so wonderful that the state trooper did come along and rescue him so he could eventually get to a forever home. So that is a really wonderful bill and great victory that we worked on with coalition partners. It was led by Humane World for Animals, and we were thrilled to be working with them on that. I also want to mention some of the work that we're doing right now concerning the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So Florida has been out of session. They are going to be out of session until January. And so it's because it's so short, we do work on other things at the same time. We work in the regulatory space, especially throughout the rest of the year. So unfortunately, right now, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, also known as the FWC. They're in the process of approving a black bear hunting season for the first time in a decade in Florida. We are gravely concerned about this and the justification for it, and also the lack of science and data that has gone into this decision. It is concerning for so many different reasons. So they've already approved a proposed rule for a black bear hunt. And again, we had so many advocates showing up, speaking out against this. So if you're on the call, thank you. They'll be voting on the final rule in August. So that is what we have to work with this summer. We are going to continue working with coalition partners, different organizations, different stakeholders to push back against this. If anyone on the webinar is from Florida and is interested in helping out and getting involved, please get in touch with me. This is one of the biggest fights that we have had in Florida in so many years, and it takes all of us to hopefully try to stop this. FWC is also working to revise fur bearer trapping regulations. They are doing this for the first time in over 50 years. They have not updated the trapping regulations. There are a few positive changes in these proposed regulations that we do like. For instance, they would prohibit the use of glue traps outside, but there are several changes, unfortunately, that would be detrimental to wildlife as well. They'll be discussing this at the August quarterly meeting as well. In addition to bears, it's going to be a packed meeting. So that is something that we will be working on with FWC and with stakeholders and advocates and supporters over the summer as well. And then in addition to Florida, I have a couple of quick notes out of Michigan and Illinois. In Michigan, they have a year-round session. It's a 2-year, year-round session. So we're continually working on legislation there, even a little bit over the summer. Things are still happening. Um, so anyway, we are working as part of a coalition to get a courtroom animal advocate bill passed there. I did mention this on the last webinar, but we're still moving with that, still doing some of the background outreach and engagement, pulling stakeholders in for support, working with a really wonderful coalition of local folks in Michigan, state level organizations. And this is the bill, just as a reminder, which would allow for volunteer attorneys to assist in determining the best outcome for animals in cruelty cases. So it would bring in a volunteer attorney, essentially to assist the prosecutor and the judge in cases where, perhaps there's an animal and we need to figure out, where is this animal going to go? Does this animal need a behavioral assessment? Things like that, trying to figure out what's going to be best for the animal in that case. So really a value add, offering additional assistance there. And then in Illinois, we were mainly focused on passing a cat declaw ban. Declaw is incredibly cruel, causes lifelong chronic pain for cats. So we were trying to get a declaw ban passed. Illinois was a tough year as well. The bill was reintroduced, so we were really excited about that, but it did not pass out of committee. It's unfortunate, but it was kind of a tough year overall for animal bills in Illinois. And we are continuing to work on passing declaw bans at the local level there. So thank you again. That is pretty much the extent of my update, and I will pass it over to Lindsay now.
Thank you, Alicia, and hi everyone, and happy summer. My name is Lindsay Verheilig, Legislative Affairs Manager here in LAP, and many of my states are wrapping up or already out of session, so I will just give a brief rundown of some of the highlights of what we've seen in 2025 so far. So first, I'll turn to Hawaii. So this year, we supported a number of bills, but as I mentioned in our last webinar, our priority bill was a bill to ban the factory farming of octopus in the state. While the bill unfortunately ultimately didn't pass one of its deadlines this session, we did make some significant progress, and it was heard and passed by 2 committees, and we were able to spread awareness of the environmental implications and potential dangers of octopus farming, and we garnered more support in the legislature and among supporters in the state to continue the fight for next year. Turning now to Missouri. Missouri session wrapped up last month, and our major victories come from the defeat of 2 bills aimed at undermining protections for animals. The first was a bill to preempt local governments from regulating certain professions, including veterinary medicine, and this would have repealed declaw bans in St. Louis and St. Louis County, and prevented municipalities from enacting any future declaw or devocalization protections. The second was a bill to dramatically undermine the state's existing process for seizing animals during cruelty cases, making it far more difficult to prosecute animal cruelty cases. Both of these bills come back year after year, and we've built a really amazing coalition of groups in Missouri and have slowly been chipping away at the opposition's arguments in favor of the bills. And luckily, we continue to be successful in stalling the bills every year. Missouri is also a difficult state for animals, but we also, for the first time, saw significant movement on a cross-reporting bill, which would require mandatory reporting of animal abuse by certain professionals providing protection services to people. This bill is so important, not just for the protection of animals, but in understanding the link between violence against animals and violence against humans. And this has been another long fought battle. And while it ultimately didn't make it across the finish line this year, due to unrelated circumstances at the end of session, we did make really great strides in bringing this issue to the forefront of the legislature for the very first time. and had really stellar support for the bill while it was in committee. And I'll turn finally to Oregon. It has been a really interesting session here in Oregon, and a lot of different issues were heard by the legislature. I'm going to go a little bit out of order than the slide shows and turn first to some victories. So first, we were part of a coalition asking the governor to protect the state's cage-free law, which was under attack by some industry lobby groups wanting to suspend the law in light of avian flu outbreaks and egg shortages across the country and in the state. And we were successful in getting Governor Kotek to agree to uphold the law. Next, there were several attacks against wildlife this year, including a bill that would have allowed counties to opt out of a longtime ban on the hunting of cougars with dogs. This prohibition passed by ballot measure in 1994, and this year was the first time in almost 20 years that the legislature agreed to consider a bill to undermine this existing prohibition. So we were a part of a large show of force against the bill, and ultimately the bill was heard and decided not to move forward with the bill. So it was a great victory for wildlife. We also supported a bill to protect beavers from hunting and trapping on public waterways that the state has deemed to be impaired. This bill is beneficial not only to the beavers themselves in protecting them from being killed, but it also allows for beavers to do what they do best in these areas and naturally clean the waterways that are in vulnerable conditions. And there's just a couple of weeks of session left in Oregon, so this bill is almost at the finish line, and we're really hoping to see it signed into law this summer. Finally, I will talk about a couple of issues that didn't make it as bills this year, but where significant strides are being made. So ALDF is a part of a coalition aimed at stopping factory farming here in Oregon. As part of that coalition, we brought a bill to the legislature this year that would have prevented large factory farms in the state's groundwater management areas. So these are areas where there is already significant levels of nitrate pollution affecting drinking water. And that's in large part due to existing farms. As you can imagine, this was a pretty contentious issue and brought out a ton of opposition. And while we didn't get the bill through this time, we had a really successful rally in support of the bill and had a ton of people come out to testify in support during a hearing, highlighting the devastating impacts of factory farms on animals, the environment, and the people in the communities that live nearby who are literally unable to drink their own water without getting sick. So now that more attention is on this issue, we will continue to fight in coming years. And then finally, I wanted to highlight one final campaign, which was a last-minute effort by a coalition, including ALDF, to get the Oregon Primate Center shut down. And this is a research facility run by OHSU where thousands of monkeys are held in captivity and subjected to painful and unnecessary experiments every year. So we supported an amendment to a bill that would have facilitated the shutdown of this center. And I, along with our campaigns manager, who actually worked as an undercover investigator at this facility, testified in support of this closure, along with close to 2,000 Oregonians who submitted testimony in support of closing this facility. So we will continue to put pressure on this campaign and all of our other campaigns and hopefully have some more good news to share with you next year. And I think I'm turning it to Kat.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Kelly. I am the Legislative Affairs Fellow. So today I have a lot of exciting updates to share with you now that many of my state sessions have ended. We're going to start in Washington State, where I'm based out of, and where we have had several victories this year with 4 bills that were signed into law. All 4 of these bills, just for reference, if any of you in Washington State live here, or if any of you watching live in Washington State, they all go into effect at the end of July. So the first, which came after 3 years of hard work that members of ALDF plus Coalition have been focused on, is a circus animal ban. This ban prohibits the use of wildcats and their hybrids, elephants, bears, and non-human primates in traveling acts such as circuses. So this makes Washington the 12th state to enact protections for animals that are forced to perform in these acts, and the 10th state to specifically ban species entirely from these performances. We worked with several coalition members on this, as well as legislators who really were passionate about this and were key to pushing this bill through the legislature after, like I said, 3 years, 3 sessions, showing the length of time that some of these projects take to get through. So excited to see it happen, and hopefully we'll be able to make bills like this pass in more states in the future. The second bill is what we call dogs in hot cars. What this bill does is grant civil immunity to a person who rescues a companion animal or, in this case, a vulnerable human such as a child, who is trapped inside of a vehicle and is in imminent danger. This bill is incredibly important because both the CDC and the American Veterinary Medical Association have stated that even if the windows of a car are cracked open, the car's temperature can still rise 20 degrees in the first 10 minutes and maintain temperatures 40 degrees hotter than it is outside. So, to put that in perspective, you might be feeling nice and cool on a 60-degree day. The inside of your car, the longer it's sitting out, can still reach 100. Once effective, provided somebody follows the steps that are outlined in the law, so double check before you act, they will receive civil immunity for entering the vehicle and rescuing the companion animals or the person trapped inside. The third bill that was signed into law protects people and their companions during disasters. When there is an emergency evacuation, families are often forced to abandon their companion animals. Many families, as you can probably expect, refuse to leave these evacuation zones because that means leaving their members behind. However, those who do leave are contributing to the top reason that they prematurely re enter these evacuation zones, rescuing their furry family members. This causes a lot of issues for disaster relief and rescue plans as they now have to rescue these humans and the animals and can really just increase danger for everybody involved. And so now jurisdictions in Washington state will have to include emergency preparedness plans for companion animals on their websites, as well as provide contacts with local organizations who assist animals during these events. Additionally, as our jurisdictions are able, they'll have to identify at least one emergency shelter that can take people with their companion animals so that you will not be forced to leave them behind. The final bill that was passed into law in Washington this year was a sweeping change to our animal cruelty and care laws. The requirements for animal shelter, food, and water and medical care have all been enhanced and clarified to ensure that animals in our state receive proper care and their owners can be lawfully held to these minimum standards. Previously, they were pretty vague and extraordinarily minimal, so it made it hard for law enforcement to make sure that animals were properly cared for, or that sentences and convictions were fair and equal among different species and different incidents that happened. Additionally, this law will provide more opportunity for law enforcement to step in and assist or rescue animals that they determine to have been abandoned or at significant risk of harm. Finally, and one of the most exciting aspects of this law, is that it also implements a lifetime possession ban on persons convicted of animal fighting so that they may never own or reside with an animal in our state again. So now I'm going to move on to Arkansas, where I'll show that not all of our victories this year have been about passing laws. As you've heard from my colleagues, we've also successfully defeated some pretty terrible bills. Cockfighting is something we remain ever vigilant for, and we saw and helped defeat several bills in different states this session, which would have weakened bans on cockfighting overall. However, in Arkansas, there was a particularly nasty bill which attempted to effectively legalize the practice in all but name. This bill aims to remove cockfighting from the standard animal fighting prohibitions and create a new section that weakened enforcement and allowed certain participants to not be charged with the crime, and attempted to permit practices such as raising and training birds for cockfighting, even though cockfighting and its activities are still illegal under federal law. So we worked with our criminal justice program and in coalition to write an in-depth opposition memo, which both legislators and prosecutors used to speak out against this bill and the cruelty and criminal activity it would foster. And thankfully, this bill was defeated just in the nick of time. So finally, as the fellow, I keep a pulse on states across the nation so that we can be ready to support and oppose whatever may come up at the drop of a hat. This can be issues that we focus on in all of our states. It can be novel issues that are coming up once. It just makes sure our team is always ready to best support animals. And so that means that now that it's June and most of these states have wrapped up their sessions, we're already turning our sights to the next year with some exciting plans to protect animals even more thoroughly. However, a lot of these plans, both in my state and others, are still in early development, and we're forming partnerships and coalitions with other organizations at the moment. So I want to ask all of you to stay tuned to our website updates and any email updates you might receive to find out more as the year progresses. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim, who will be sharing updates on behalf of our colleague Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Kat. As Kat noted, Jennifer is out of the office today, so I'll be providing the update for California. Have lots of exciting news to share thanks to her terrific work in the state, and thanks to many of you who I'm sure took action on our alerts thus far. Just to set the stage for California, that is the state that has one of the longer sessions, which convened in January and goes through mid-September. So we're just at the halfway point in the state for the legislative session. And in fact, this week is a particularly busy week as this is the House of Origin deadline at the end of the week, also known as a crossover deadline. And what that means is all bills introduced have to pass the chamber in which they originated by the end of this week in order to continue moving on during this legislative session. So lots of great news to share thus far. The legislation to ban cat declawing in California passed the Assembly unanimously several weeks ago, and so that has secured its place in the Senate for consideration, and we expect the bill to be heard there in the coming weeks. We've also been working on a trio of puppy mill bills in the state, and California is one of the states that's already passed a number of bills to strengthen protections against puppy mills, but we're working on some more nuanced issues, including 3 bills that take on things like including brokers as part of the retail pet sales ban. So brokers, or essentially third-party sellers, will no longer be able to sell animals online or directly to consumers. It also provides the requirement for breeders to provide more source transparency for the dogs that they're selling, as well as bans the use of non-refundable deposits that sometimes sellers require when they sell animals. And additionally, it requires the third bill requires the Department of Food and Agriculture to collect and make public certificates of veterinary inspection or health certificates for any animals that are sold online in the state. So the 3 bills are a combination to continue chipping away at the ways that the commercial dog breeding industry are continuing to import animals into the state and hopefully make the process more humane and prohibit more of those inhumane sales in California. Additional good news, there were efforts to use dogs and bear and mountain lion hunting in the state, or rather for the bear hunting. That legislation died in committee. And the mountain lion bill, which would have allowed the use of dogs and hazing mountain lions, also failed to advance this year as well. We had one tough battle with the captive wildlife bill. This bill would have prohibited public encounters with certain species, such as bears, non-human primates, sloths, otters, and others. Unfortunately, this bill met quite a bit of opposition from traditional zoos, roadside zoos, and the TV and film industry. So because it's a 2-year session, we worked with the author's office and others in coalition to essentially make this a 2-year bill. So we're going to continue working with stakeholders and see if there is some common ground that we can find without weakening the intent of the bill. So that one will continue on. It'll just be brought up again on the Assembly next year. And then ongoing over the summer, we'll continue supporting 5 other bills that we've been working on. One is a classroom dissection alternative, and this requires teachers to inform students in writing of their right to choose a non-animal replacement, as well as present sourcing and environmental concerns about dissection upon request. There is an update to the stalking definition that adds threats made to one's pet, including service animals and and emotional support animals. There is a wildlife connectivity bill that expands upon the progress made to date on wildlife connectivity that requires regional transportation planning agencies to safeguard and enhance wildlife connectivity when making their regional plans. And then finally, the FOUND Act. This was introduced in response to the LA wildfires that occurred earlier this year, where it was quite chaotic and uncertain about how residents could access their animals if they either had to flee and couldn't access for some reason, if they were at work and couldn't get home and couldn't get their animals or otherwise couldn't remove them. There was quite a bit of chaos and misunderstandings about who could access the animals, who could return to their properties. And so the FOUND Act would ensure that companion animals are protected during emergencies and that local governments implement clear procedures to support pet owners during and following evacuations. Those four bills have all passed their House of Origin and have crossed over to the second chamber. And then the fifth bill is a cockfighting bill that would set the limit on owned roosters to 25 total and no more than 3 per acre. That bill is still waiting for a vote in the Assembly, which we're hoping will occur sometime this week so that it too can cross over. Otherwise, this summer, as the bills have reached their second chambers, the process starts all over again. We will be lobbying the second chamber members to advance this legislation. So we expect committee hearings to start next week, and we'll try to advance all the bills mentioned thus far. And hopefully by the September webinar update, we'll have much more good news for you that the bills have passed second chamber and are being signed into law. And with that, I will turn it over to Alicia, who will be giving the update for Steph today.
Thank you so much, Kim. So like Kim said, I'm giving the update for Steph today because she is actually traveling for work. She is balancing lobbying in the Massachusetts State House and also the Rhode Island Capitol building. And I think this truly speaks to the nature of our work. You never really know what's going to pop up, if it's a hearing, if your bill's moving. So I am covering Steph's slide while she is out doing that work. Steph covers all of New England, including Massachusetts and Rhode Island, as well as a few other states. So let's dive into Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, the annual Lobby Day for Animals is coming up. That will be on June 24th. It's going to be a great day. It's co-hosted by ALDF, MSPCA, Animal Rescue League of Boston, and Humane World for Animals. So all Massachusetts residents are encouraged to register and can easily do so via aldf.org/events. So please do check that out if you are interested. Lobby Day is an opportunity to meet fellow advocates as well as your state legislators and learn about pending animal protection legislation this session. So among the priorities this legislative session, kind of getting into those a little bit more, they include bills to facilitate pet custody or consider the best interest of pets in divorce cases. To restrict possession of animals for certain convicted animal abusers for a period of time or until they can demonstrate rehabilitation. To prohibit the retail pet store sale of dogs, cats, rabbits, and guinea pigs. Really exciting to see rabbits and guinea pigs also included. That is not always the case with those type of bills. To expand access to housing for families with companion animals and to reduce the use of rodenticide rat poisons that are harming wildlife and companion animals. There is so much going on in Massachusetts. It's so exciting. Massachusetts has a 2-year session running from January of 2025 through the end of 2026. So there is still quite a ways to go. And that means there are plenty of opportunities to engage. Shifting gears to Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, the legislative session will end later this month. So we're at the tail end for Rhode Island. But before it does, ALDF is working to push several pieces of legislation, including bills to phase out cat declawing, unless it's necessary to protect the cat's health. Building on our recent success in Massachusetts, and of course, we've heard in several different states, we have talked about other bills that we're working on concerning cat declawing. So also a bill to add certain serious animal cruelty crimes to those that can constitute domestic violence. A bill to allow the court to award custody of a companion animal to a plaintiff in a protective order, and to close, and the last one is to close the market to new clothing and home decor items made using factory farmed fur. So then we can jump over to Colorado. Steph wanted to share one really exciting piece of news out of Colorado. We were glad to support the coalition backing legislation to further upgrade Colorado's pets in housing law, signed in May and effective in 2026. So that's HB 25-1207. It builds on a 2023 law to further remove barriers to housing for families with pets. And it does so by prohibiting insurance companies from discriminating based on a dog's breed in policies for residential structures, including multifamily insurance policies, and by creating a standard pet policy for state subsidized housing providers that allows for tenants with 1 or 2 dogs or cats. So that's really exciting as well. And I can conclude Steph's portion just by saying that we really recognize and appreciate the tremendous effort from the bill sponsors, state and national coalition partners, and from local advocates. So I can now turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I'm going to jump right in with an update from New Jersey. You're going to hear a common theme with some of the issues that we're covering. And in New Jersey, the Humane Pet Store Bill, which prohibits the sale of cats, dogs, and rabbits by pet shops, has garnered overwhelming political and public support. Although it was anticipated that we would see movement this month in the assembly, it does seem that the New Jersey election, which is for all assembly members and the governor, may be a contributing factor in stalling the bill. The primary is next week, and there have been no hearings scheduled yet this month, which will only leave us with 3 dates before summer break. The general election will also play a factor in the fall, and we may not see additional movement on this bill in the Assembly until mid-November. Moving on to the killing contest ban, which would prohibit killing certain wildlife at competitive events for cash and prizes, this bill has a stronger chance for a hearing in the Senate in June, which is much more encouraging as the bill sponsor, Senator Cruz Perez, is also the Senate committee chair. If it does not receive a hearing this month, we do have another chance in the fall before the end of the year and the end of this current 2-year session. If it doesn't pass by the end of this year, we're going to have to start all over again. In New Jersey, thousands of bills are introduced every year. There's no cap, so we will get this reintroduced. I want to also mention some really good news. The declaw ban bill, which would prohibit a person from performing declaw surgery on a cat, was posted and passed out of the Senate Economic Growth Committee last month. It was second referenced in the Appropriations Committee as there is a reporting requirement that may require a fiscal note to provide an estimate of the potential financial impact of the bill. We're incredibly grateful that the sponsor, Senator Singleton, has been a champion of this issue and is completely committed to seeing the bill passed. And now on to the New Jersey octopus farming ban. Also, a farming ban that would prohibit the aquaculture of any species of octopus for the purpose of human consumption. This bill also had a hearing last month, although it was for discussion only. It was very well received by the Senate committee. We're going to continue to work with the coalition and the bill sponsor to garner additional support for the bill and get a better gauge timing for a vote, which we also hope will be in the fall. But this is the first time this bill has been introduced, and we really might need to do a robust education campaign. So I want to move on to New York. And in New York, the legislative session is scheduled to end on June 12th. There are a few bills I'd like to update you on, as we are awaiting action on the Wild Animal Traveling Acts ban, which prohibits the use of bears, wild cats, and non-human primates in circuses or traveling acts. This bill is sponsored by Senator Fernandez and Assemblymember Glick. The bill is passed out of the Senate and is awaiting movement in the Assembly Codes Committee. Next up is the Renters Insurance Discrimination Ban, which prohibits restrictions on insurance policies based solely on the policyholder harboring or owning any dog of a specific breed or mixture of breeds. The bill is sponsored by Senator Gianaris and Assemblymember Rosenthal. This bill has also passed out of the Senate, but is one step closer as it is calendared for an Assembly floor vote. We're also super excited to be working on the octopus farming ban in New York, which, just like New Jersey and so many other states, provides that no person shall engage in the aquaculture of any species of octopus for the purpose of human consumption. The bill was recently introduced and is sponsored by Senator Martinez and Assemblymember Simone, and has an extraordinary group of organizations supporting it, including environmental as well as animal protection. Our focus now is continue outreach over the summer to educate legislators on the issue and build support and co-sponsorship for reintroduction of the bill next year. New York is a 2-year session as well. They're in the first year of a 2-year session. So even though we're have some movement this year, we're going to have to start all over again next year, but it is still a continual session. So if you live in New York or New Jersey and would like to connect, please let me know. And Kim, we're going to move on to the next slide. Don't be put off by the angry hen here. We just want to transition to advocacy and highlight how much you can impact each and every campaign by speaking with your representatives. As Kim mentioned, state legislatures have varying lengths for their legislative session, and Congress follows a different timeline as well. However, as we come into the summer months, things often slow down, making it the ideal time to initiate outreach to your local, state, and federal representatives. If you are unsure who represents you, please do visit the ALDF website to search for their names and their contact information. We would encourage you to follow your representatives on social media, sign up to receive email updates from their offices, and of course, as a constituent, we encourage you to call their office to introduce yourself and schedule a meeting to discuss animal protection issues. Really quick tip, before you have a meeting, if with your representatives, please take a look into their legislative voting records and or try to understand their general philosophy on animal issues. Are they in line with yours? That would make things much easier, but they may not. And so we always encourage people to look for other commonalities. Do they have a job outside of the legislature? Are you or anyone you are affiliated with that occupation? Have they received awards perhaps in other areas of social justice, environmental, family protection? If you can find those shared interests, it could provide you with an opportunity to make a stronger connection. And while you're on their website looking for this information, please be sure, again, to sign up for their newsletter, their Facebook page, and follow them on social. It's also important to note that not all legislators will agree with our issues 100% of the time. A legislator who does not support a ban on, say, a wildlife killing contest today may be a future prime sponsor of a puppy mill ban tomorrow. So it's super important to maintain a respectful relationship so that you can engage on a mutually supported animal protection issue. And by the way, when you do your outreach, you may not even speak with your representative directly. That's totally okay, as staff members are absolutely your gateway to the elected officials. They're often the eyes and ears for the legislator and are the ones who, again, oftentimes assist in moving animal protection issues forward. Please take the time to develop relationships with staff, and that way you can become viewed as a credible source of reliable information on animal issues. Please know that our legislative affairs team is always available to provide guidance on specific issues and outreach, and we thank you in advance for doing this bit of summer homework. And we're going to move to the next slide. Because of course you will want to have an understanding of the current laws in your state. We recommend that you begin by reviewing the Animal Legal Defense Fund annual state ranking report. The results might surprise you. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't already viewed the 2024 edition, which I am sure each and every one of you have, but Oregon was ranked number 1 and North Dakota number 50. We also ask that you visit our legislative page to take action on your local, state, and federal legislation. And please visit our website to sign up for those action alerts, read the latest news, and of course, join us on social media. We truly hope this information will empower you to contact your representatives and build a trusted relationship along with their staff. Each and every one of you are a critical component to the success of our campaigns, and we look forward to working with you together to pass stronger animal protection laws. Thank you so much.
Amazing. And then we will open it up for some Q&A. We do have a few questions that have come in, but if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A box. One is just talking about someone asking if they've never reached out to a legislator, never really done anything proactive. What would you suggest as a great place just to get started?
Hope it's okay if I answer this one. It's kind of in line with what we were just talking about. Great question. And we also have on our website, the ALDF website, a Lobby 101 and a 2.0 webinar series. We would encourage you to view both of those. There's some really great information for anyone who's never done any outreach, best practices, again, more tips for communicating and building a strong relationship with your legislators.
Excellent. And then how about trying to figure out what to focus on? People are asking, since resources tend to be fairly limited, how do you prioritize where to concentrate your work? How do you decide whether to chip away at many issues versus putting significant resources into a smaller number of challenges?
I can jump in for that one. It really is a challenge trying to determine which issues we're going to take on because unfortunately animals are harmed or exploited in so many different ways. And we're an organization that really tries to tackle as many harms to all different types of animals as we can. But that said, we have to consider the limited resources and staff that we have at the organization, and we want to maximize our impact. So we consider the type of suffering, the number of animals involved, and we essentially create a list of our priorities that we want to try to work on and introduce in the states and at the federal level. We are very opportunistic, however, and as you've undoubtedly noticed throughout the presentation, sometimes there are bills that fail to move forward, but there are other bills that have moved forward in the legislature that year. And so sometimes we can jump on board and support additional legislation that perhaps other animal protection organizations are working on, or issues that legislators have introduced, and which is really important to us as well. Even if it isn't necessarily one of our top priorities, it helps us build relationships with coalition members, with other stakeholders, and with legislators. So it's a little bit of a calculus that we work on. We do have a number of issues that are top priority for us, but really any opportunity where we're able to jump in and have a positive impact for animals, we always try to do so.
Excellent. You mentioned the coalition. Some people are asking if you can talk a little bit more about that as far as what the coalition consists of or who it consists of. Anything else you can share about the coalition?
I'm happy to field that, though others please jump in if you have additional information to share. Coalition work is really critical for our movement. We have several like-minded organizations that want to take on issues that would protect animals. And so we work in conjunction with one another. We don't necessarily want to duplicate each other's work, but we want to support the work across the movement that further protects animals. That said, sometimes just animal protection organizations working on a bill isn't enough to have it advance. And so we want to consider how else might expanding the coalition further support legislation. Is it working with environmental organizations or law enforcement agencies or public health agencies and organizations and such? There's so many different types of stakeholders out there who can support legislation that in some way positively impacts animals. And so as we consider introducing legislation, we try to think about what different types of diverse voices and perspectives could positively impact our work. And we work in conjunction with those groups to introduce and support our legislation.
And
Awesome.
if I could just add to that as well, it's so important to work with not only other national groups, but local groups as well. So for those entities within the state that have established sometimes, decades long relationships with legislators, it's really critical that we all work together. It takes a village. It really does. I know that sounds so trite, but it's so true. None of us can do this alone. We must work together. And so we're also always looking for non-traditional allies outside of even the sphere of human health, environment, and animal protection. So it takes a little bit of creativity as well, sometimes to make those connections. But I think that's also why it's really important for everybody who's in the movement, whether you're with an organization or an individual, to think about your sphere of influence and some of the people that you know and you can identify that might work out to be a really strong coalition member. And it's very specific, as Kim mentioned, to the issue and the state.
Great. In reference to the Michigan Courtroom Advocate Bill, are we working with any law school on that? And if so, any opportunities for law students to get involved and be advocates?
Yes, absolutely. There are so many great law students in Michigan working on these issues, and they are very much part of the conversation with this bill. Because if we are able to get this passed, there would be an opportunity for law students to serve as the advocate in the courtroom under the supervision of a volunteer attorney. So there's a really wonderful opportunity for law students should the bill pass. Law schools are definitely part of that conversation. But there's also opportunity for law students and law schools to help get the bill passed as well. So kind of advocating for it on that legislative side of things while we're working to make this law. And then, of course, the opportunity for law students afterward. This bill has passed in Connecticut, and there is so much law student interest in Connecticut in becoming one of these advocates. So very much so. I think that this is a particularly wonderful opportunity for law students and the law schools and the students and the Animal Legal Defense Fund student chapters, I might add, will continue to be involved. And if anyone is a law student, looking to get more involved in our work, I have to put in a plug for our student chapters and our animal law program. If any interest, please do get in touch with us and we can connect you with the right folks in our organization so that you can get involved in this bill or any number of the bills that we've discussed already.
Excellent. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Kim. Thank you to all of the Legislative Affairs team for keeping us informed and for all of your hard work and dedication. Thank you to everybody out there for joining us and for all of the work that you do on behalf of the animals. This is the second webinar of a series, so there are 2 more quarterly update webinars to attend later this year. The next one will be September 24th, same time, 12 p.m. PT, 3 p.m. Eastern.